This week, we thought we'd do something of a crossover episode and bring the one and only Colin Alexander over from the Fortune's Fool stage to the Rune Soup main stage. So how are you doing, Colin?
Fabulous. Cinematic universes collide today, so very exciting.
Yeah, for people who are unaware, there are some, dare we say, catchphrases that end up that seem to end up in every episode of Fortune's Fools, and that's one of them. Cinematic universe, but also there has to be at least one, and it would have happened anyway if we're talking for an hour, but like at least one RuPaul reference. So I thought I'd get that done right away.
Oh, it's it's the content that people are after.
Yeah. Well, I mean, speaking of, one of the reasons I wanted to do this now is we are in the final leg. Like the end is in sight of what's been quite the journey, right? So I'm starting on the book, which for people who are unaware is a full fortune-telling book, and it's designed to be like my fortune-telling book as well as the companion book to Fortune's Fools. So the way it's being written, it's designed to work for playing cards, tarot, any of that kind of stuff. So you can read this book and in theory afterwards be able to pick up any fucking deck of cards and tell some fortunes, right? So that was the moment where I'm like, actually, there's a way of talking about Lenormand that makes it bigger, right? And so I thought we'd go through the cards at this point where they're not actually done. We're at 29 out of the full 36. So we're at, our age,
of course, yes.
If you will. But I think if we go through just where we're at, a lot of stuff, one of the big things that I've noticed, and I was forewarned by my neighbor, Avalon Cameron, about this, but as you go through the process of creating a deck, stuff happens to you in the week related to a card. And that's happened enough times that there are little anecdotes and stories that go with it. But for those of you who are like listening along, I actually think this will work as an audio episode. Of course, we're going to be visually going through the cards if you're watching the video, but there's just even describing the process of each one, there's this insight, I think, into fortune telling and life, and creation is ceremony, which is sort of the kind of overarching theme of the episode on each of them. So if you do happen to listen to this while you're on your commute or so on, please keep your eyes on the road and don't try to watch this on YouTube as you drive to work or drop your kids off at school or whatever it may be. I mean, I'm not your boss, but it is not recommended. But I guess I'll start before we jump into the cards, Colin. Like, how did you think? What's like the biggest learning? Like, what is the thing that surprised you the most so far about this project that you didn't expect going in?
I was thinking about this earlier because I looked back through. I was looking back through the shows to see how long it had been going on for. March we started, so like 7 months. I think just there have been like several boundaries of like the way that I make stuff and draw and all this that has just sort of been slowly but surely dissolved through them, which is a really good thing. When we started this, we were doing like a black and white deck. There were like the first sort of 10 cards, we were kind of trying to figure out what the style was and just sort of nail the look of the thing down. And I went in thinking, right, this is gonna be like black and white. I'm a line art guy. Like this is like, no problem. And then it was like, we're doing color, we'll do that. And so it's been like a really good process of just like expanding myself as like an artist, which is so gross to say, but that is an unfortunate fact. But yeah, it's been a very good journey, I would say.
Yeah, we will definitely get to that as we get to the beginning cards, because that was the original idea. And the first, one of the things that maybe other than Camellia Elias would say is the insets are very important for this deck, and I think very important for fortune telling. I think you aren't a fortune teller if you can't read playing cards, and I would, as far as I can tell, the majority of Lenormand decks that are produced today, like contemporary ones, don't even include them, which is heresy, right? So this is like a fortune telling and and creative discussion. But we wanted to actually genuinely emphasize the insets, and obviously black and red. Although, again, as part of the journey, we did start off trying to do something a little bit more like a Spanish playing card or naipes deck, and that didn't work. So we've actually iterated and developed quite well. But one of the things that's so powerful about playing card fortune telling is that, especially when you have a bunch of cards out, like you're doing a tableau, you can tell right away if this is a positive or negative reading based on, well, those words are a bit challenging, but is there more red, it's like a generally you're looking at a yes, or if there's more black, a no. And so we tried to lean into that to start with, but the range of kind of images that are in the Lenormand deck meant that eventually, fairly quickly, we went in another direction. But it does mean the first few of them are kind of dark, which isn't necessarily a bad thing.
Yeah, I was. Yeah, that's right. Because the first, I think by like card 3, we were like, right, this is going to be color. So the first 2 were initially done in black and white.
Yeah.
And like a tonal thing. And they were also done in like a smaller canvas, because we were trying to figure out what the canvas size we could get away with for printing. So there's been all these like delightful issues that that usually I think people do not see develop for like a deck or any kind of printing project. That's usually what happens behind this. But every week I was just like stressing about canvas sizes. I was like, I need to get to the bottom of this. But it was a process of getting there. Yeah.
Well, let's look at a couple of them and pick that conversation up, because you're right. Like the third card is when we realized we needed green because it's the clover card, right? And so it was that card that's like, well, we can't have a red clover. That's psychotic. And so really the clover card is kind of like the entry in a funny old point. But I messed up the screen share last time, so let me just bear with if you're on the audio. I've got multiple screens going because I am a professional content producer, and that's generally what this looks like. All right, so you should be able to see the twink.
There they are.
Very good. All right, so we've come back around on this one. This is obviously the first one. And what's interesting, I think, about Lenormand is comparing it to tarot. Its first card. The tarot's first card is kind of cuter or less hurried. The first card that announces itself in Lenormand is a real surprise bitch energy, right? Like there's sort of the same idea, like the fool kind of setting out on its whimsical journey, right? But depending on how that's depicted, it's like some kid with a dog pulling his trousers down, about to walk off a cliff. It's almost slapstick, whereas the rider is like there are the enemies at the gates, or the barn is on fire. Its entrance, it announces itself with, I think, quite a bit more excitement, and that's one of the kind of like key differences with the deck. And so this is one that was mostly black and white to start with. And I mean, as you can plainly see, it's like, all right, well, the horse can be Black Beauty and remain as such. But this is card 1, and it's a sort of a good example, I think, of bringing color back into our life.
Yeah, the first 3 cards are like Judy Garland stepping through the barn door, and Oz, like just sort of from black and white right through to color. Technicolor.
Awesome. We can pretend
that is the clover card was probably that moment for us.
Yeah.
A very gay reference, just to kick things off.
Well, the whole thing, I mean, this is and we got someone, bless them, in the Telegram chat very early on, but someone said something quite wrong-headed, but with heart in the right place, where you're dealing with, and this is the same for, just because cards are centuries old and understandings and conceptions of gender have necessarily developed. Someone said there should be one signifier and it should be a hermaphrodite. And I'm like, well, the one gender.
Oh, yeah.
And you know
we
what
love
they
a monolith,
mean. And they were quite insistent, and I think then left the group. But like my first question was, okay, well, then you've dropped the deck down to 35 cards. So what do you want to do? If you want to mush the man and the woman card into one card and call it a hermaphrodite and think that's what, equity? That's not how, it's like literally not even how gender works. It's just quite confusing. But nevertheless, one of the cards that we can have that explores a bit more of that polarity is the rider, because I call it the twink, because it is the twink. If you read for gays, and I do because I'm infested with them, so they're everywhere like bed bugs. It's more often than not like the twink card, and it is like a younger male, but the male thing is where we went to play with this, right? So in the history of Tasmania, there's a French woman, Marie-Louise Girardin, and basically she was having an affair with her husband's business partner, and her father was connected to the Admiralty in France, and basically got an admiral who was out here, D'Entrecasteaux actually, to he basically got her to not necessarily stow away, but pretend that she was a man, Louis Girardin, and join the French expedition out to Van Diemen's Land, or Tasmania. And so she was actually an incredible woman, and the first woman to fight a duel in Tasmania, amongst other things. And she shacked up after this during the war with the Dutch. She shacked up with her Dutch lover on a French ship that she was designed to guard. And they both died of dysentery within a couple of days of each other. So it's kind of that's a gross way to die. But there's this sort of cute story of a woman who was a man. And as far as we can tell, the reason she was in a duel was because one of her shipmates was saying, but you're a woman. Like, stop pretending you're a woman. And she was having none of it. She was, no, I'm a man. And as a man, we're going to duel. And we're not sure if the other one died, because we don't actually have the evidence of, she lived, so she may well have like killed a bitch and been the first one to do it. But she not only, so this is different to like the Shakespearean idea of dressing up as a man. Marie-Louise, or Louis, was very insistent to the point of willing to shoot someone, that she was in fact a man. And that was the energy we wanted to announce the deck with.
Indeed.
Killing men.
Yeah. A little bit of misandry, I guess. And this was like the way the show works is you'll discuss like the layout, the sort of story behind each card, although we're not allowed to say the word story. Well, I think we are now at this. I think we can just do away with that. We do a story, Lenormand, kind of. This was like the first sort of introduction for me to getting like all these story elements into a card that maybe to the casual viewer it just goes over the head, but it's like it's part of the sort of the cinematic universe that we're creating, which is, a phrase you invented, obviously.
Clearly.
So it was like it gave me the kind of the texture of what the project was going to be, because it was like, okay, we have to get all these elements in that aren't necessarily part of the original Lenormand deck, but they are part of this deck. So we have to mesh and do a little bit of storytelling within the illustration, which makes it all the more interesting for me to do week to week.
And we had Ryan Edwards, Gay Lenormand Royalty, has been on the show in the chat for this episode. Oh, no, it was the next one. So we'll jump to that, the ship card. Before we do, because this is how it works, is that we'll talk about one card one week, and then you'll go away and work on it, and we will look at that one the following week while we're talking about the next card. So that's the process, which means we actually saw the twink or rider card in the ship episode.
Yeah.
So one of the things Ryan mentioned when this showed up was that one of the bodily signifiers, like the rider card, if you're doing a health reading or something similar, is the thighs and or buttocks. And if you look at what Marie-Louise is serving in this card, it's legs for days, right? So there's been a few moments where we've accidentally landed on how it signifies, right? And this is one of the ones, this is actually quite close to what the insets will look like as well, because they're based on some old-timey decks, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. But you can kind of see that it's not gender non-specific. It's that you can't actually tell from this angle what gender is upon that horse, right? And that's very deliberate, and that's kind of, I think, contemporizing, but also reifying what the rider / twink card has always traditionally signified. And you see the knife in the boot, all those kind of like little elements that we will know are there, and will of course be in the book. And for people who followed along on the journey and have the cards, that is available to you for a reading. Because as we move to the next card, the other thing that's worth bearing in mind is the kind of one of the overarching points of this was to create a deck for jobbing fortune tellers. Like, you don't have to be to use them, right? And actually, this is the other reason why we're doing the show now, because there are still some pre-orders available, and Christmas is coming. They definitely won't be ready for Christmas. They will be shipping in Q1 of next year. But it's something to buy if you like what you see, because this is the only way you're going to get my book as well. It's the other thing to bear in mind. But we wanted it to be a deck for people who are actual. We want it to be able to be used in a professional cartomantic setting, because there actually aren't that many contemporary decks that are useful for that. And I think a big part of that is, just as we mentioned, like a lot of the contemporary Lenormand, for instance, don't even include the insets. And I wouldn't dream of leaving them quite literally off the table were I reading for a client. But one of the other things and you were talking about the size of them before, is we're like, is it bridge card? Is it playing card? Is it what have you? And these are going to be playing card size, because there's also going to be, because you've done all this work with the insets, a playing card deck that comes with it as well. And I like that idea. And they have to be, the thing about Lenormand as opposed to tarot is that you do a lot of big spreads. You do like a full grand tableau of 36 or so, and they need to be able to fit on bistro tables to stay with the French theme, right? And so that's the size we're going with. And so you will see, because it's obviously a high quality print, but they are playing card size. So you'll see the little knife in Mary Louise's boot, and you'll know it's there. But that's kind of where we're going. And here we are on the ship.
Yeah. Artwork not finalized, but we're kind of, we're in the final 6 cards of the live shows. So this is going to be like a real energetic six shows, shall we say? Because I'm basically doing rounds of drafts on stuff until it's where I'm happy with it. And you're happy with it.
You're closer to the end than I am. I use a software called Scrivener to write my books, or at least I do now. And you set a word count limit and the days until deadline, and I'm not at 10% of the words. So it's obviously summer in the Southern Hemisphere, and it'll be as last summer was, a summer of book writing for me. Somewhat frantic book writing. But it's weird, like you think 6 cards, 6 weeks. Oh, I got plenty of time. 6 weeks to write a book. Get off
it's
Zoom,
a lot
Gordon.
it's to me, when I'm like planning the time, I'm like, oh, there's tons of time, forgetting that there's like 2 other jobs to do, and like all the and Christmas and New Year, and it's like, no, that's fine. I'm like that dog in that meme that's just like the room is on fire. Oh, we forgot to mention the song choices for each card. That was
Let's get back to what did we have for the writer? Because that's been a really fun part, I think, of the process. Is and I think and Camellia, of course, is where I most learned this from, but I'm pretty opposed to like fixed meaning, definitely. And traditional meaning is in there as a secondary thing that's accrued to the cards over history rather than something innate. But that presented us with well, then how do we talk about, and this is really good when it comes to like fortune telling and ceremony, how do we talk about something like a card, like the rider card or what have you, in other ways without saying meaning? And one of the things, and this will actually be in the book because we've ended up with a strange and very gay playlist. We have song choices for each card. So what do we have for the rider? Oh, DJ.
So your choice for the rider was Queen of Broken Hearts by Black Bear, which I had not heard, but was a total bop.
Yeah, it's
and
a good one.
I ended up going with Old Town Road by Little Nas X and Billy Ray Cyrus.
Well,
so
the horse thing is there.
Like the kind of riding theme.
Yeah. No, I went. Yes, that's right. I went with the kind of not like the cruelty of twink attraction. It's a weird sentence, but if you haven't heard of Black Bear or Queen of Broken Hearts, we'll actually include the Spotify playlist below this episode. So if you are listening, actually, if you are in the car and you're like, all right, let's see if we can do a visual episode on an audio basis. Once you're done with it, just click down to the show notes. And for the rest of your apparently very long commute to work, listen to the Spotify playlist. All right, what did we have for the ship?
So for the ship, oh, hold on. Oh, okay, right. So for the ship, this was this marks the first for your choice. That marks the first appearance of the Queen Nicki Minaj, and it was Starships, of course. And I went with Orinoco Flow because I was struggling that week. There's a few where it's just like I've just given up.
But it's not
yeah,
not like a wrong answer. That's one of the things we wanted to capture, because the ship is probably my favorite card in all decks. It's not my favorite in this deck from an art perspective, just because you outdid yourself as the project continued. But in Lenormand, the ship is very much my energy, which is why this is Hobart, which most people won't know, but there's Kununyi, the sort of sacred mountain behind it. And the ship card traditionally is signifying a ship coming in. Like, my ship has come in. It's travel and so on, but what we wanted, and ships generally finish their journey in the evening. So we had that. It's also one of the tertiary indicators is a spiritual journey between worlds, starships. So we see the stars in the sky, the stars reflected in the water, and the ship coming in with this guy on the dock. And that phrase, funnily enough, there's another connection to it. And Marie-Louise, and my ship has come in, emerged in the Low Countries with the rise of the Dutch East India Company, because the beginnings of like corporate investment and stock exchanges and so on happen, where people would give their money to the Dutch East India Company to invest, to get all the way to the East Indies, which is more in my corner of the world than it is Holland. And obviously a lot of stuff can happen to a boat in the 1600s going from Europe to basically Indonesia and back. And so if you didn't have any money and you're waiting for your ship to come in, once it did come in, you were minted, right? Because everybody loved their cinnamon. And so that's kind of the energy of the card. It's movement, but it's also a ship coming in. And that's, and I had to have starships because yes, the Queen had to be, it's disappointing she's not on the first card, but you know, all that work she did on her trunk, is not appropriate for the rider. So it's not Nicki Minaj on the horse. But yeah, I mean, I love the energy of this card, and you can kind of see, and it works for this one. Like, as you say, we start off darker. You can see the bones of the original black and red premise. As you say, this one's not done yet because you'll have to come back around to them. But there'll be more color added to it, but the silhouette of the guy on the dock probably not going to change too much. Like it actually works.
The first 11 cards were all worked on a smaller canvas, and then we knew what size we were going for the deck, and then I could figure out like what canvas size I could work from digitally to kind of to size it down, and so we don't lose like any kind of detail and doesn't end up just like a smudge on the card. So the first 10, like, we've been going through the process of like the HD remaster of the first 10 cards. It's been really cool because it has been like, now that we're getting towards the end of the year, and it's been really cool to see what I was doing at the beginning of the year versus what we're doing towards the end of the year and the end of the deck. So it's been fun to kind of fix, not so much mistakes, but just to kind of upgrade what we were working with in the first few cards.
Yeah. Well, I'm just going to jump because we'll go to the Clover, but you can see the difference because if I jump to the house, here's the kind of the first one, if you're watching along, although you're watching like a recording of a Zoom call, so it's not exactly going to be full 4K for you, right? But you can actually see that's where some of that difference in the detail you can see in the hills there versus it. But we'll get to the house because boy, did you have some fun with it. So the Clover is obviously it's a luck card, but it's a luck card because it's plant magic. So that's actually one of the things. It is herbalism, it's marijuana, it can be ayahuasca, although the tree is also that, certainly in our deck. So we had to get like, well, how is it luck and how is it magic? And this was the beginning. And speaking of Peru and so on, there is like a cosmic riverboat that sails the dimensions that has plant healers and whatever on it. That's part of like particularly like Shipibo inspired curanderismo. And in our cinematic universe, we have that boat also has a casino on it. So you have this like cosmic or interdimensional riverboat casino, which shows up elsewhere. And this guy is either a croupier at the blackjack table, or is there actually winning up big. So we needed like a lucky charm thing. We needed it to be, so it needed to be plant magic as well as clover. And although no one knows this because it's just a close-up of the lapel, it actually worked really well in that kind of like narrative or story. But as you can plainly see, this is card 3 where we realized, oh shit, we need color.
Excuse me. Yeah, I believe this was the first card in the early stages that got to like a finished point first. Like this one was the winner at the early stages, just because the idea was so clear, and it went through like multiple stages of development to kind of get to where it is. And this is kind of where we were like, all right, we have a universe here. We have something to work with. We know what we're doing now. And we get kind of an idea of it's like a kind of Looney Tunes art kind of, I don't know, there's some kind of, it's a fantasy cartoon kind of thing that without actually being ridiculous, but once you know the backstory, it's like, oh, okay, cool, this is what this is. But love it now.
Yeah, me too. What did we do for songs?
So for songs, I chose Get Lucky by Daft Punk, and you chose Call Me Maybe by Carly Rae Jepsen.
Yeah, I think you won that one. I think it's not really a competition, but those are both bops. But I think I think you
Sound of the Summer. It's not a competition, but then when we hear, so sometimes we don't divulge our choices to each other till the reveal. It's not a competition until literally you hear the other person's song, you're like, oh god damn it, you won this one.
All right, so Under the House, which there's some things that I just find it really, really hilarious that the cards that have initially stumped you have been for very like Aquarian reasons. Like there's just like your Aquarius energy is not good with the heart or the home or any of these things. You're like, I don't understand this. Can you have a boot? Like it's been really fun. That it has not the cards that aren't strong really in your chart are like, oh my God. But it's been good for me because like, you know, I'm lobster sun. So the ones that maybe aren't strong in your chart are strong in mine. Chief among them, the house. And so, but this is like the original idea, because I mean, talk about your early interest in like architectural style drawing, and we thought we'd go in that direction. It looked like a DK book, and it was just a hot mess.
Yeah, I've got like a background in interior design and architecture, so there's like I actually have studied like the kind of drawing that you would see on like an architect's plan for like a proposed project. And I was like, oh, this will be like when we were discussing, like this is going to be like a cinch, absolutely in the bag. And we went from like a drone shot of the house and its sort of surrounding sort of land, and then we went to like we moved the camera down, and I just was not feeling house, and I have continued to struggle with it throughout. But it's still not done to where I would hope it would be, but it has. And also this year I've been like in a sort of like a housing situation where I'm like, oh, okay, this is not my home. So it's like, it's just one of those cards that I'm just gonna like, I'm gonna slap, when we get this printed, I'm gonna slap it down on the therapist's desk and just be like, you figure this out for me.
The idea, and I mean, I love it. So what we sort of went with was, what would Rivendell look like in the Sacred Valley in Peru along the Urubamba River? So the house card, and you see that with the inset being, and these are just placeholders, obviously, because nothing's finished yet, where you see a K and a heart. It's just so we know what's on each card, right? The house card is obviously a house and a home to start with, but it's also like, in this case, the home at the end of, say, for instance, a long trek, that kind of Rivendell energy of like, there's a couple of cards that do that, but that's what we wanted to do here. And it's definitely heading in that direction. Like, what is the perfect home for me Like, what makes me feel the most home-like? And it's like, well, could you put Rivendell in Peru? And in this cinematic universe, you can. What do we do? What do we do for songs for this one?
This was so you went with a really good one, Home by Dolly Parton.
Oh yeah.
And I chose it again. I chose Burning Down the House by Tom Jones.
Yeah, that wasn't a good week for you.
So early on, we really should have seen it coming.
Exactly. We should have diagnosed, but like, yeah, the song's a bit off. But fortunately, Dolly nails it. Dolly nails the energy of a house or home card, right? So yeah, really happy with it. Really happy with the direction it's going. And that's, if you're doing fortune telling with Lenormand, it's the energy of ideal home, right? And perfect home, dream home, hence the King of Hearts being the inset for it. But onto, and kind of staying with Peru in its own way, although Peru meets Mesoamerica, this is the tree card, and this is a sort of stylized chuchuasi. Chuchuasi is one of the plant spirits I dieted in the jungle. And it's obviously a healing plant because the tree is a card of health in kind of like traditional identification, but it's also a card of slowness because forests move slow. And we kind of wanted to do that and inexorability, right? So what we have is some forest ruins beforehand, because the tree, when you have slowness, what you're talking about is something that will just quite simply outlast you. And enormous trees near the kind of like the vanity of humans thinking they can last longer than something like that is one of the things we wanted to capture. And it's this one, again, still lingering in that black and red world, but it works for Chuchuasi because it's, well, actually, the thing you drink looks very black, but we needed it to be kind of like a blood red bark because it's a tree of health and so on. But yeah, how was this one for you?
This was there was not so much trouble with this, but then about 4 weeks ago we were going through everything and we're like, so of the first 10 or 11 cards, there are a few that just needed to be completely redrawn just because they don't stand up to the sort of fidelity of the later cards. And that we had like a solid idea, everything was set out, but we were just like, this needs to be redrawn because it's just not, if this went in with the newer cards or the later cards, it just wouldn't look like they were the same style. So we had to kind of take everything and do the HD remaster, a little Botox, a little facelift. But it was a joy to work on. I really enjoyed the kind of the elements. Before the pandemic, I had planned to go traveling through like Cambodia and stuff. So I felt like I was getting a little kind of taste of that through this. So it was quite enjoyable in that respect. A few of the cards ended up being like how I was going to spend like my year. So that I'm very grateful for that.
Yeah, I know the feeling. But actually, that's worth discussing from a Lenormand perspective, particularly once we get. So Lenormand, I was thinking about this in my shaman training this year. Alberto said that the I Ching is a oracle from the plant kingdom. So if you want guidance from the plant kingdom, you can use something like the I Ching. And the reason for that is that it originally began as yarrow sticks, right? So if you go back into the Neolithic, so what you're actually doing is consulting yarrow spirit effectively as part of your divination. And you can make a similar case just with a little bit more of the frenetic energy. And again, it begins with the rider for Lenormand, because Lenormand is obviously named after Madame Lenormand. You can watch the previous episode that Colin was on to kind of get a little bit more of that backstory. I would dispute this, but like she had nothing to do with the creation of this deck because it happened after she died. But that's kind of unfair because her reputation is what was affixed to it. But the cards themselves are from a Austrian game, which itself is based on a list of coffee ground readings. So just like doing tea leaf reading, but coffee ground reading, you can look and see, would you see an anchor? Would you see a cross? Would you see a tree? And so on. So it's sort of obvious the ones that are in it. And so in that respect, Lenormand is itself a plant oracle, right? So that's good. That's kind of hidden underneath the twee the original kind of depictions are very not just European, but twee, bougie, urban European. So like it's too overly pastoral and cutesy. And one of the things we wanted to do was to not just internationalize it. I mean, it's in another dimension. So this isn't strictly Peru because this is a chuchuasi tree with Maya-inspired ruins. But we did want to add some of that, which is kind of like more your background energy, like, and it suits like a chaos magic world. We wanted to add a bit more drama and a bit more elevated a bit beyond like a leotard and a wig to appease Michelle. But one of them was to make it more international and kind of like more moving and electric, which means there's obviously we did the Hobart and Tasmania stuff. There's some sort of Peru, but sort of not. And just to give it a bit more of that international and less twee flavor, because the birds, for instance, when we get to them, that one annoys me possibly the most because it's like too cutesy for what's like a quote unquote negative card. But the tree's a really good example of that. It's usually like a European conifer, like, oh, how cute. No, let's make it like an enormous healing tree from the Amazon, destroying a certain. But let's just elevate our drag just a little.
Yeah, and I love the detail of the little kids playing it like amongst the ruins and the roots and things.
Yeah,
that kind of stayed throughout all the renditions, which is quite cool.
Yeah, that's the shamanic notion of like the descendants. So it's not just the ancestors. Because kids are like it's a weird way of saying it. Well, kids are death clocks, right? So if you see children, it's a reminder you're going to die, and it's quite a good card to have, even though kids grow fast, and it is a growing card. It's also it's a slowness and inexorability. Like that's what children, if you're lucky enough, actually are. They're your death clock, right? So they need to be the death clock card. We'll call it. All right. Did we do songs to this yet?
We did indeed. So I chose Spirit Indestructible by Nelly Furtado, personal queen of mine. And you chose Glass Temple by Jacare. That's right.
It
was like a cool
like music. Yeah. You tried to slip old Nelly into most cards.
Sure have, buddy. Sure have.
All right. So Clouds is one of the cards. This is a good example of the twee European thing that doesn't actually do what it's supposed to. So traditionally, the cloud is supposed to be unclear because you can't see through them. But what kind of jets are they flying on in the 1850s where like clouds get in their way? So we went down a cloud inversion and fog angle, right? And this is another one that probably is this the redraw or not?
No, this needs to be. That says that this needs to be redrawn, and I'm quite excited to do so because, well, there are elements in it that I think I've worked on in other cards. So like, there's the city in the different in the distance, and we have like a terror card that has a similar kind of field. So there's like a chance to kind of make it more connected to the sort of the story tissue of the deck.
Yeah.
But yeah, this would be a redraw.
Yeah. So, but you get the idea of it just looking at it now. That and actually, this is a really good one, really good example. James and I went up nearby mountains, and we got a cloud inversion. We went up to see the view, as you do, and get to the viewing spot, and it's just a complete cloud inversion. The same week we were doing this, so we've ended up with a few of them, and I'll mention them if I remember as we move through. But that's a general idea. Like the cloud card is supposed to be like unclear. The way is unclear, so we're actually bringing that into the fucking deck with like a fog and cloud combination. So you see the path heading into the clouds. You can kind of see that there is a settlement in the distance. Unclear how you get to it, or they're brigands or something underneath it. And this one is European just because why not? It can't all be in like alternate reality, bizarro Peru. So that's the idea behind this. What do we do for the song?
We did, I did, where are we? I did Gwen Stefani, What You Waiting For? Just like a kind of unsure how to proceed or why aren't you proceeding? And you did a really cool Cosmogony by Bjork. Gorgeous.
Yeah. Good choice. You know, this isn't that bad a playlist, is it? Really?
Really, I will say it is diverse and at times perhaps good or schizophrenic in a good way. But as like everything is kind of the artist, it is good music.
All right, so onto a card that's in the process of redraw, and it's another.
Yeah.
And this is one, and when I first, years ago, I think it was one of the first times that Camellia had the Lenormand class running, and she, like, one of the cards she goes on her delightful rants about is the serpent card, because it's like really sexist. It's supposed to be the other woman, or the kind of like calculating woman, so either like the bitch at work, or the woman who's trying to steal your man, all that kind of stuff. And it's not that they don't exist. Obviously, there's certainly bitches at work. So you need it in there somewhere, but it is very tied to a sort of 19th century Christian understanding. Real Madonna whore stuff as well, because there's obviously the woman card is a bit more stylized. So we wanted to celebrate that by going like, no, let's actually make her a sorceress. Let's make it, and again, this, we go back to Peru, or literally you get outside of Europe and the snake is sacred, right? The snake is sacred for all the right reasons, but it is power and transformation and all that kind of stuff. So we went with a kind of like an ayahuasca anaconda with Shipibo design being summoned by what will become. Who will that become, Colin?
This is this is inspired by the one and only Michelle Gomez, who is a character actress who literally is just character actress who does serpent card characters. And who is a really fabulous actress and comedian and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, this was like the card. I was like, all right, this is my kind of, this is what I'm dealing with. This is my shit. Because the bitch is for me, in terms of tropes of characters that appear in, that's the best one. So I was thrilled to kind of get started on it, and the HD remaster is coming along very well, and I'm excited to kind of get more detail in just for the snake. So the snake will look slightly more realistic, and the sorcerer will look slightly more like a Scottish bad bitch.
But you can see that kind of original stylized sort of like line drawing hint of where it was going beforehand in it. But yeah, no, if people are, before it turned to complete crap, the Sabrina reboot from a couple of years ago, Michelle Gomez is the one you're thinking of in that.
Yeah. Once you see her, once you Google her, you'll know exactly who it is, because
yes, her.
Every iconic things.
So yeah, we wanted to take it in that direction. And this is a deck not just for fortune tellers, but for the most part, people who do magic. So there's actually a number, we've been through them. There's plant magic on clover, and there's chuchuwasi for the tree, which is another, like, that's more a herbalism card. It would depend on the question, which is another thing, again, you'll get a lot of in the book. But there's quite a few cards that are explicitly magical, and this one is that. You have a sorceress beside probably the Ukiah-li by the size of it, like it's not the Amazon, but we wanted it to be, if it's the serpent in the sense that it's like the serpent in the garden, well, that ended up in the Bible via the Old Testament, and it ended up there via like stories of beings that are tens of millennia old as like the cosmic serpent. So we decided that's how this card's going to go, but it still needs to be like that. She will steal your man. That card needs to be in there somewhere, or it can be you doing the man stealing, or the sorcery to prevent it, and so on. But what do we have song wise for this?
So I had, oh, well, okay, this is funny. I had Pure Pleasure Seeker by Moloko, because it is just that kind of, as a sorceress's song.
Yeah.
And you had I Put a Spell on You. It was the Hocus Pocus version, but in the playlist I've had to use a stand-in because that's not available on Spotify, which is interesting because we thought we hadn't used it. So this is how long we've been doing this. Like, there were songs we thought we'd forgotten we'd used. But both great choices, I think.
I think yours is better, right? Because there's the sexual power.
Oh, it's so good
in that card. Your song choice is better. My song choice is a bop, but yours is more appropriate for the source.
But I think they were. I will say, so on a few occasions, like the two choices together work really well.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
as you know, like so that's like, and we don't like think, well, we're going to, we don't like discuss it beforehand in any depth, but oftentimes it turns out that they work really well together.
Yeah. And for people who are listening to this, the next episode, it'll be next week, but the next episode we do, depending on when you're listening or watching this, is the sun. And I've had my song prepared for that for quite some time. So looking forward to it. I've actually been making notes since we started going, oh, actually, that's a really good one for whatever. But I think
I'll
you
need
won
to bring my A game.
Oh, no, I don't want to spoil it. Both song choices are actually going to be in the book on the kind of like in the chapter for each individual card, because why the fuck not? I think it's a really good way to look at both songs, and just, this is a perfect example of it. Both of those tracks give you a feel
Of the
right away for what the card is. So yeah, yes.
And the
All
book's
right.
like a book. It's not just like a little white book that
Oh
comes
god,
with
no.
like
Yeah,
it's a full situation.
I promised that, and now I have to deliver it. So mixed feelings, but yes, my fortune telling book is on the way.
I'm sure it'll be another banger, no doubt.
Well, here's hoping. All right. On to, speaking of song choices and so on to the coffin card. Now, this was real fun for me because this is like the shittest card in the deck, obviously. There's sort of, and it's a departure and a good one from contemporary tarot readings where it's like, actually the devil card or the death card is good. It's like, well, not always and not often. Very difficult to put some shine on the coffin card. The coffin card is a bad card. If you get the coffin card, it's a negative outcome. Not necessarily your death, but you can kind of go, well, I guess it's like boxes in a hallway, but is it after a funeral? Who knows? But it's, so that was really fun to just be like, this card needs to be that, right? It needs to be shit. There's no way you can be like, death is about transformation. It's like, yeah, putting in the ground. And
transitioning into death.
Yeah. So like Lenormand is kind of better at that, and consequently, and did I end up with this in my song choice? The kind of the motifs we wanted to go with.
You came in with like a heavy theme, so if, I would believe, I think you came saying this is going to be the song because it was arrived in your head as like a full, like this was the cinematic universe just in full force. If you're going to say Amy Winehouse,
I am going to say Amy Winehouse.
Yeah. Yeah, and I was like, that is perfect.
Is that what I picked?
The choice was Back to Black. Yeah, because it was like a funeral procession.
Yeah, it's one of the most perfect fucking film,
and it's not even like a night. It turns out it's either like it could be perceived as like a child that she's burying, or it's her own heart, if you want to go like figuratively. It's so good. Like everything it was just like, this is another redraw just because the detail isn't where it needs to be for like the larger canvas that we can work on. But like everything is just there ready, like it is just set in stone, like this is what it is, which it turned out really well, I think. So,
and if you've just pictured the Back to Black music video, it's just absolutely perfect for it. And the other, it was kind of that, but but set in Arlington, right? So we wanted it kind of in that real X-Files funeral scene sense, where we just wanted like all black umbrellas. And so
we went through like a few versions of sketches where it was like, I think we joked at the time that a few of the layouts were more like a Snyder, like the Batman director, where it was more like that kind of comic booky sort of look to it. They got more detail in, but it wasn't quite. It didn't read as clearly as the top down view of the coffin did. Yeah, it was one of those. It took a while to kind of get to where we wanted it to, but some of the sketches the concept is good. Yeah. I chose "Stay" by Shakespeare's Sister because it was it's a shit card, and it's grief, it's loss, it's all this kind of stuff. Yeah, good thematic match there. All right. No, that turned out all right. So, another, at least in my hands, another sorceress deck. This is a flower so this is the bouquet, and it's sort of in an alternate dimension, Kew Gardens, because the bouquet is another European card. The difference between like the language of flowers and like herbal witchcraft is one of degree rather than kind, right?
So even the idea, when you think about something like Kew Gardens as an imperial project of kind of like gathering up all these exotic plants from all over the empire and the world, some of which, like these, what are they called? Those Colombia, the white flowers that are hanging down.
Devil's something.
Devil's
They were
trumpery.
like the zombie. They were like zombie dust or something.
Yeah. So they're one of the most deadly flowers on the planet, and it's sometimes unfortunately cut with cocaine and other stuff, so people die. But they're these beautiful, really deadly things, and to hang them in the bouquet. So the bouquet is also a card of like herb lore and handy people things, but a bit of a delusion. Consequently, like use of things like laudanum or opium or all that kind of like 19th century goodness. And so that needed to be in there somewhere. And there's something creepy about it. It speaks to the competence level of someone arranging the bouquet that they would include deadly flowers in it. And it kind of gives it that final secondary sort of twist. But it is, the bouquet as a card is like the human arrangement of nature. So it needed to be in like a greenhouse and so on for good and for ill. And you can kind of see the card sort of warps in that way, as if you are, which I have in fact done, coming up on something at Kew Gardens, which, because that was 2 stops away from where I used to live in London. But getting high and going to Kew Gardens was, the annoying bit was just being on the train. It came up too quick, but other than that. So we kind of wanted to have that sort of a bit, have I just been poisoned energy to it as well.
And it kind of the sort of structure that kind of warps above the bouquet. It's kind of, as it's like that kind of like cathedral effect you see when, if you're doing like shrooms or whatever, like you kind of start to see these like weird, everything kind of just turns into like a ceiling for whatever reason. This was it was fun to do because it was just another sorcerer's card, and it's another queen. So there you go. It's never not good. Never not a good time.
But this was also the way we've kind of picked more energetic scenes than a typical for a Lenormand deck. Each week you've ended up with like a research assignment. It's like, well, now I need to, and they're all pretty gay. Like now I need to learn floral arranging because I have to depict an arrangement.
Yeah, I become an expert in something. gear by the week.
Saddles, and wait till we get to the butt card.
Well,
what songs do we have for this?
This was let's see. So I chose Tiger Lily by LaRue because it has it's a flower, but also, or it's a plant, but also it's that kind of menacing, like there's a predatory nature, and that was, we were just going with like the druggy kind of, the sort of menacing vibe of these sort of devil snowdrops or something they were called. I can't remember. And you went with My Girl by The Temptations. Is that right?
Yeah, no, that's right.
That is right. Yeah.
No, I get it, because it is kind of like that. We had to do the main signifier of like, you aren't just trying to poison someone. You have to do like a, I love you. Here are some fucking flowers, right? Because it is also like a wedding bouquet and so on. Don't use these in your wedding bouquet. Unless you, which is maybe like if you hate your bridesmaids, and by the end of it you often do, maybe then you use this one. But that was like, because we put Baby's Breath in for that kind of like naff wedding reference that the gays will get. But onto the scythe, and putting it in definitely more 2021, 2022 context, in the form of like an urban uprising. But the scythe is the scythe, like it's a fast cutting card. The inset's a jack of diamonds, diamonds are sharp, jacks are fast. So you kind of get fast cut idea from it. It's a card of reaping what you sow and consequences, which is why, again, energetically, I wanted it to be like a mob, a mob outside a palace, or a mob in this case in some, heading towards the Burgermeister's villa or something.
Yeah, it's another redraw. This is actually, I think this is when the deck, we started really like, our ideas just kind of were coming in hot together. This came out and we were one and done, and everything was kind of sorted for the week. Because the idea was strong, and we just were like, that's good. But this is the last card, the second last card that was on a smaller canvas. So it's a redraw just for like the fidelity of the card when we get to the final printing. And it's like the streets of Cairo or something. In the back, like there was a lot of cool architecture to kind of research. But it was great. It was great to work on because it just felt. If this one also was the first one, I think that felt like a comic book cover. So for me, that was like that's also where I come from. So it was cool to kind of work on, definitely.
No, it's good. And speaking of, one of the things that makes it really graphic novel, and we'll get to it with the bird card as well, is putting the inset actually in the card. So some parts are on some cards anywhere where it merits it. The inset's actually in it so that the image on the main card kind of appears above it. And that's the point of that, is to actually make the insert part of the world, to actually kind of like make it relevant. And again, I think I haven't seen anyone else, maybe I'm wrong, certainly haven't seen every Lenormand deck, because you eventually get sick of looking at them because they're so twee very often. But yeah, this is a really good example of that. And now shall we, what songs do we have for this?
This was a good week, I think. This was Don't Fear the Reaper by Blue Oyster Cult, and I went with Everybody Wants to Rule the World by Lorde. So we went with like I went with like mob apocalyptic cinematic trailer, and you went with like the classic choice. And the album art for that song is all for the Blue Oyster Cult, for the Don't Fear the Reaper, is also pretty much like the guy on the river boat. I think it just like I remember sending it into the Telegram group, and I was like, this is the guy this is the guy that's doing like this Lenormand day.
All right, and now we come to perhaps the signature card. We come to the butt phrasing.
Oh yeah. Yeah, this is going on the cover of the box for sure.
Is this a redraw or is this not?
This didn't need as much a redraw, just because the image was so close up. It didn't require there. I've went in and kind of like adjusted things and changed things around. And change the kind of the layout of or how the whip breaks out from like the border and everything. But I didn't really need a redraw just because it has such a close-up kind of image, so I could get detail.
So what kind of research did you do this week, Colin, for this?
That's that. If you go back and look at my Google photos or whatever it is, like throughout this project, like I am getting jail time, like for sure. There is no way my FBI agent isn't like making a list and checking it twice for me.
Yeah. Well, one of the things we had to look at, because were there, not that it's set in the 19th century, but it's not set in the 19th century. Like it is in another dimension. One of the things we had to look at were, did jockstraps exist in the 19th century? And not only did they were invented for a very 19th century reason, which was to keep to provide a brassiere for men's butts as they were like riding bicycles over cobbled streets. So the jockstrap was invented for use with the ultimate Victorian contraption, which is like the early bicycle over their cobbled streets. So that worked, but like we had to do something kind of like fun and gay. And for people who are listening to it, it is like a riding crop hitting a butt, right? Now, this was and we had long discussions on the episode and in the group about it. Whilst we wanted to kind of bring life to traditional Lenormand signification, we have to make sure it doesn't stray too far from the original meaning. And this was the closest we got to straying too far from it. But it actually isn't, right? Because it's close, but it is cigar. The riding crop or whip card traditionally, especially if you're going back to the 19th century, was used on children. Like it's literally the spare the rod, save the child era. And so the idea of like using the whip on someone, you kind of wanted to play with that idea, because it did move into being like, in contemporary readings, it is a BDSM card. It's like, it can be like, it's pain and repetitive pain. And that can either be punishment or it can be sex stuff or what have you. So it's cheeky, quite literally, because it's a butt. That's the joke. But it's still keeping with the meaning of like repetitive pain, whether you enjoy it or not. And it's just like, irresistible. Like, of course, the whip card was going to be a butt. What else would we do?
I remember it being one of the more fun episodes of the show so far. I think it was just pretty much it was pun after pun, and then the chat, like the live chat, was just those animals were out of control. Like, it was a good time, and it goes well with like the Jack inset and everything. But it was one of those ones that it was fun to work on. I couldn't work on it in public, as I often like to do, like to maybe work in a cafe or a pub or whatever.
Well, you say that, but you lie to people about what you're doing.
Yeah, that's true. So when people like, I go and work in cafes or whatever just to get out of the flat or just whatever. And then people will eventually someone occasionally will walk up and say, "Oh, that's great. What do you do?" And I'm like, designing a board game. That's what I'm doing. It's like Monopoly. Like, I don't want to get into the conversation with people, because then they go from being interested to like, oh, okay, like, so you're like a witch? It's like, yeah, well, cool, whatever. Just give me my coffee and leave. It's a difficult and awkward scenario every time.
Yes,
because no one knows what an illustrator. Everyone knows what an illustrator does physically, but they have no idea. They don't seem to have any concept of what the job is. So it seems like it's a very nebulous thing to explain, despite it being a very simple craft.
Yeah. Well, there's also, because this is a problem, and it's a good problem to have, I guess, that I've had, which is, if people ask, like, please don't ask me what I do, please don't ask me what I do, and then they do, and it's sort of, okay, what do I say? Because if I say author, if I go forward with that, because that's true, I am like, oh, right, what do you write about? And I'm like, you shouldn't have asked that. Because you actually don't want to know. If it's a person in the cat, it's the same thing. It's like, oh, what are you working on? It's like a fortune telling deck. It's like, well, I can't get out of this conversation now. I'm too far in. It just raises further questions, and I'm going to have to ask them. And none of us are going to enjoy where the rest of this interaction goes. In the case of an author, it's like, all right, what do you write? As if like, well, do you read many books? Because the reality is most people don't. Like, anything I might have known, I'm like, well, what are you? I'm not J.K. Rowling. Like, what?
Oh my God.
Right?
I think there's the moment of terror that they're going to. It's like a stand-up, if you're like a comedian or whatever, like, well, tell us a joke. It's like that moment of terror, that it's coming. It's like, well, what have you written, or what do you draw? Like, and it's like, I don't want to divulge this to you right now.
Yeah, because it's just further questions. None of us want to be here that long. It's like, I write about magic and animism and spirits and so on. And like, oh wow. Like, you gotta, oh wow. It's like, what is this person? Same thing. Is this person insane? Like, does he actually think he's a writer, but it's like literally like a crayon on the wall of the bus shelter? Like, is this?
Yes, the Mackie decides.
Anyway, so that was the butt card. What did we do for songs? Because as I recall, it's quite a good
week. The song. This was your choice. S&M by Rihanna.
Banger
was the ideal, a banger, and I went Strict Machine by Goldfrapp.
Oh yes,
because I was going for there's like a whip sound in it, and it's just about like,
yeah,
it's the same vibe. Both have the same vibe, but I think that week was the winner would be, as she always is, Rihanna.
Awesome. Now we come to, I think, a signature card other than the butt for the deck, because it's never more obvious. And I find this super interesting from like a 19th century drama perspective, that, yeah, like, let's say coffee grounds, it's going to be like a weird loop shape for it to be the bird or a bird card. And that translates to the birds like twittering or whatever that you typically get, that real pastoral look in a Lenormand, where it's like a couple of robins in like a nest, right? But the card itself is gossip and like literally Twitter, like horrible conversation, like just it's loose lips sinking ships, it's gossip, it's people saying not threats but like malicious stuff about you. So it's a garbage card, right? And it's just so surprising and annoying that it's just kind of like cutesy little robins. But no, let's make it the worst bird known to mankind, the London fucking pigeon. There's no other animal that, especially coming out of a tube stop and they fly too close to you, and it's like, oh god, blah. right? That's the energy we want to bring to this card. So tell us about this one, Colin.
This is the first card where I moved to a larger canvas, and so like just straight. I think when we dropped it in the show, like the show that we revealed it, that was evident. So it was a change in tone, and I think we were able to kind of really narrow in on the style of the deck going forward. Also, so we did the first 10 or 11. And we were, getting a feel for it and getting into the zone, and it was getting more solid as it went along. Then we moved into the larger canvases. So the next 10 are kind of still in flux because they're like the middle-aged cards. Like they're not quite there yet. But they're more detailed. And I really opened everything up, I think, for the project as a whole. So this was like, for it being a terrible card, kind of was like the card that was like, this is where we're going, this is the direction, and it was fun to do. Also, I love the little like gossiping pigeons just at the bottom. I think
exactly,
that was like my favorite thing about it.
Yeah, but it's got
not
like
even like the gangster pigeon at the front that's like breaking out of the borders.
Yeah, because it is that kind of like obnoxious, in your face. It works so well for the card, and it's also got like real Hitchcock energy too, because this is the other thing about kind of the lack of drama in a traditional Lenormand. Is just like, put more birds in. We found the same thing when we get to the mice. Just like, put more in. Why is it 2 robins in a nest when it
kissing or whatever?
And also there's a kind of like political commentary, because you clearly got the Houses of Parliament there, which is one of the things I wanted. Like, I wanted it to be London because it's London pigeons. But if you're talking about like noxious speech, like just switch it off. What better than politicians in 2021, right? So we nailed it. Well, what are you going to say?
Love it. And it's like a cloudy, foggy day, so it's like everything is obscured by all this chirping and chatter. So you came in strong, as I came to find out. You come in strong with like strong concepts, which makes my job very easy.
Very good.
So it was a pleasure to do, despite it being literal flying rodents.
And what were the songs?
What do we do? So Our Lips Are Sealed, that was your choice. The Go-Go's, fantastic. I went in with Gossip Folks by Missy Elliott, and then later amended, which isn't technically allowed, but just because it was literally the night we closed the show. And I was like, oh, Babylon by Lady Gaga, because it's literally gossip destroying like a kind of like a town, I guess. So yeah, those were 3 great choices, I think, for the week.
Yeah, definitely. Missy makes it back, because I have like, so you have Nelly as your go-to. Mine are obviously like Nikki and Missy. And like, can I put Missy? Yeah. Well, the other one is Kylie. Like, God, it's just it's fucking music. The amount of times I try to, have I done Kylie yet? And you keep going, yes, you have.
A few times. It's never a bad thing. I'm just surprised I've not like shoehorned Anastasia in there.
Hey, look, we're not done yet. All righty. So now we get to my son, Toby. The kid card. And what I wanted here was that obviously it is the card of the child, so it's children, but it's a child on its own, which I always quite like. And so it's the really, this is the fool card for the Lenormand, because the child card is the beginning, because it's a child. And so we wanted it to have that kind of, it can be the beginning of a project, it can be that kind of optimism. So it needed to be a child like just living his best life, just having fun on his own. So it needed to be a superhero cape. And again, I used League of Extraordinary Gentlemen as my allowance for having a cape in a technically 19th century situation. But like crossing you can see kids in the background, but Toby, which is the name we landed on for my son, mine and Angela Bassett's son, is like just living his best life. And it's that real innocent child energy of like, I'm just fucking around in a river, which again, kids don't really do today on account of drowning risks, but it has to have that beginning project kind of like kid feel to it. So it's cute.
Yeah, it was a fun card. And it kind of, this is where we started I think really getting into like the cinematic universe, which is a phrase you invented, where this is like behind the house card, this is like in the valleys behind the house card or whatever. We were kind of like discussing just for fun, kind of where this would be in relation to like other sort of cards that are in that same milieu of like tone and jungle and all that kind of stuff. So it was a cool card to do.
Yeah. And the inset has an interesting modifier where Toby's going to grow up to be a bad boy. But
anyone, as someone as a kid who played in Rivers, you end up being like not up to good things. Like,
yeah,
as an adventurer's soul.
Yeah. But spades, again, as Camelia will remind us, it's the jack of spades for people who are listening to this. But spades are also something you use to dig with. So it's the kid who is playing on his or her own in nature, making mud pies and digging little channels for the river and all that kind of stuff. Grows up to be a bad boy. I wouldn't have it any other way for my son, Toby.
Indeed. I think the song choice reflects that. You went with He's a Pirate from Pirates of the Caribbean.
Yeah.
And I went for Unwritten by Natasha. I went super gay. I went Unwritten Natasha Bedingfield. Just like the future and all that kind of stuff, our hopes for the future.
All right. That's actually, again, if you put the two of them together, absolutely.
Yeah.
Really good.
A great weird playlist.
All righty. Now this one, speaking of like cinematic inspiration, there's obviously big Kill Bill energy to the Fox card. And the Fox, again, the Lenormand deck is originally a bourgeois like parlor hobby for women. And I don't mean that in the sexist sense. I mean it in the sense that women's lives were very constrained in terms of the things they were supposed to be interested in. So like a bourgeois urban woman's parlor hobby is kind of like small and cute. It's like in that way that Jane Austen annoys me. It's quite small. And so that's one of the reasons why the pastoral stuff like the birds is so cutesy, because these women wouldn't have a deck that had like London pigeons in it. And the same thing with the fox. It's typically just like a fox near a rock or something. But it is supposed to be, in that traditional European trickster god sense, a trickster. Like it's supposed to be the wily fox, right? And so we absolutely took that energy to, because the famous phrase like, fox in the hen house and so on. So we put a fox in the hen house and we gave it that kind of like attitude of, it probably called you on your phone to say, guess where I am. It's like, fuck. Like, so it's the card of being outsmarted by a wily trickster, and someone like it's in his nature, right? It's that kind of, or her nature, if we're sticking with the Kill Bill kind of like feel to it. But I thought we were innovative. I mean, we are, obviously, we're amazing and innovative people. But I thought we were the first ones to do this. And then Benabel Wen shared a kind of like a deck she uses like to read for kids. I forget the name of it, a Lenormand deck, on her blog recently. And they have like a fox looking at a hen house. I'm like, okay, all right. Well done, vibing the same thing. That was this weird cutesy deck for children where a number
of possum. It's like they're all possums. It's very cool.
That's right. But they were all, some of the tableaus were very similar to ours with this kind of like high drama, chaos magic graphic novel kind of feel. Yeah. And here's this cutesy like possum one doing.
I think when you break away, I think you're right. When you break away from like the pastoral kind of, chintzy stuff, maybe like the ideas are out there that we're all just waiting for this like kind of Lenormand deck that just isn't tacky in that way. Yeah. So maybe we all arrive at the same sort of area of idea.
Yeah, I think so. But I love this one. I think like getting that like that look on it's very difficult to put a look on a fox's face that conveys exactly the meaning, but you did.
Yeah, this sort of from after the pigeon card, as I have christened it myself. These need like a round of draft just to get more detail in. But I really enjoyed at the time. One of the references was the Spielberg UFO movie.
E.T.
The one. Yeah, with like the spotlights, kind of the light coming through, kind of the the hen house, and I just thought that there was a cool element of that
Yeah.
that vibes just like the whole trickster thing. So it was a fun one to work on.
Yeah. This is
Cool.
yeah, this is a trickster spirit card. So it's really good. What songs do we have for it?
So I've messed up the order of the of
Because
it.
I had He's a Pirate for this, didn't I?
Yeah, you did.
Yeah.
So which kind of still works, but yours was all right. For the child card, yours was all right. Supergrass, which I remember at the time thinking, my God, that's perfect.
Yeah, there you go.
And it's the same idea, and it has the same idea as the pirate card, where like you hope this is a scam. If you had a kid, it would be a scam. So yours was He's a Pirate, and mine was Goldeneye from the Bond movie.
Yeah, but another trickster figure, just like in theory, a good guy, but
not really.
Depends on how you feel about MI6, really.
In fucking deed.
Awesome. All right, now we get to the bear card. Now, this was another one that this is a really good example of like the chintzy twee thing that I don't think it's not that it's not in there. It's supposed to be like a mama bear thing, but it's also traditionally your boss or something. But again, it's that, and this is the opposite of sexist. It's pointing out that women's lives were constrained in the 19th century. Like it's a mother bear card. I'm like, yeah, but it's a bear, right? So the protectiveness is because they're a very, very dangerous animal. And so we needed to kind of have
especially
that.
a mother bear.
Yeah, exactly. And so we needed to have that sort of phenomenological reality that this is a dangerous animal, but we also wanted to get that protection. So the sort of angle we went down was a vengeance one and like an eco-vengeance one. So the bear, as far as anthropologists can tell, one of the reasons it is kind of like a quintessential shamanic animal. Two reasons. It stands on two legs, so it's actually a shapeshifter. Like when you look at a bear, sometimes it looks like a human, right? So it actually can live in both worlds. It's a quadruped, but it can also stand up and look like a human. So like a shaman, it's a shape changer. But also because of hibernation, it spends time in the other world and so on. So it's like this ultimate shamanic animal. And so, and if it's a protection card, we decided to go with like a Siberian shamaness. Basically, the general idea is real Captain Planet feels, but the general idea is that you can kind of see she's summoning. The bear's on the way back from destroying some kind of early industrial facility, like a mill or something in Siberia, and we actually checked. So in the background, you can see. And I knew this anyway because you can still find them all over Britain, but like old 19th century power station technology, and chain link fences were invented in Birmingham in 1844. So there you go. We're still in the 19th
Industrial
century.
Revolution, baby.
So we're still in the 19th
that,
century with it.
It was another card that went. This was one that had like multiple sort of sketches for the layout before we kind of decided on this. And it was cool. Like we have it like it's kind of the sort of good natured, or maybe that's not a great term. It's kind of it's an opposite to the serpent card, like where that's a sorceress, this is a shaman. So they're like one's for perhaps more selfish means, and this one's like for the greater good. So it's a cool kind of magically imbued version of the bear card. The actual drawing of the bear this is more like a line art drawing of the style that I would be used to sort of doing in the old days before Fool's Fortune. So I think just that's, to me, I'll kind of do that over and make it more in line with everything else that's on the page. But I really love the composition is strong and the power is strong behind it. So again, another like strong concept, to be fair.
Yeah. What do we go with for songs?
This is another great week. I went with Power by Kanye West.
Mm-hmm.
And you got another Nicki Minaj in there, Monster. So with a bunch of other
both went with
people.
Yeah,
we both went the Kanye route.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to say you won that, but once is really good. Kanye won this week.
Kanye won. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, but it's a cool card.
Onto definitely a very Gordon White card. It was always going to be. I did write that book, Spaceships, Electric Boogaloo. this is the star card. And of course, it is Göbekli Tepe whilst activated. And this one, there's a little bit, it carries on to the next. The next two cards are like starships, right? Because you can see Orion's belt in the sky as the stars. But the star card is obviously a destiny card. Traditionally, that bit's correct. But it's also the way stars signify destiny is like a sky ground dualism. It's like how the stars are in your life, bringing down the stars coming to Earth, etc. So it needed to be in resonance with the stars. And enclosure D at Göbekli Tepe in particular is essentially like being in the inside of a drum or a guitar when it worked. Like you could hit the T pillars and they would vibrate, and depending on what else was kind of packed around them, they all would have kind of tuning forked. So you're in like a sonic device. You are in resonance with these stones that are also the stars. So that was the kind of way we wanted to bring, again, a little bit more of that kind of, rather than the cutesy Disney when you wish upon a star, it's like, no, let's make it humanity's first star temple where they took drugs and ate meat and who knows, sacrificed things. Let's just like, let's kick it up a bit. Let's elevate our drag for the star card.
Yeah, I love my favorite part to draw was the dance and shadows kind of against all the obelisks and things. But it was a fun card to draw, I think, because I had no idea what from week to week I kind of don't have any idea what you're going to kind of drop on me. So it's quite exciting, and I was like, oh, okay, cool. But yeah, I think the only thing I'd change is maybe just move the Orion's belt just sort of slightly it wouldn't be astronomically correct, but just to kind of move the Orion's belt kind of into the center of the upper left card, just to kind of make it, a bit more balanced.
Yeah, fair enough. What songs do we have for this?
For this one, we were Paloma Faith Stargazer, and I went with Cosmic Girl Jamiroquai. So again, they kind of jammed.
Yeah, into it. All right, so carrying on. Speaking of Orion's belt, there's the Great Pyramid. Now, this is the stork card for people listening, and the stork is a traditional European signifier of new beginnings, because they're a migratory bird. They return to Europe in the spring, right? Because they fly south for the winter. So it's kind of got like a Eurocentrism to it, which it's like, hang on a minute, kind of got a Eurocentrism to it that is valid in its own way. It's not like the storks aren't there in the spring, but more interestingly, where do they go when they're not there? And they go to Africa, right? So that actually works in the totality of the idea of the stork quite classically delivering the baby. Because if you've read Starships, referencing the previous card, according to Dr. Wetzel, the idea of a bird like a stork bringing a baby from a soul, from the well of souls, is probably 100,000 years old or more, because this idea, this motif, this mythical motif, is found in sub-Saharan Africa. So if you sort of map, which is what he did, if you map the journey of mankind out of Africa around the planet, you can kind of family tree different myth themes and motifs. So when you, speaking of Disney or any of that kind of like nursery stuff about, well, where do babies come from? I mean, it's like, well, the stork delivers them. You're actually repeating like 100,000-year-old like human cosmic belief from Southern Africa. And so the stork card is new beginnings, but it's new beginnings bringing a soul from the well of souls. So I wanted the pyramids in there, and I wanted it to be like that kind of journey, because a beginning is a journey. So I'm really happy with kind of like, it's the prequel stork card. It's like, well, where were they before they're in Europe as a new beginning or an arrival? And it's almost an underworld card in that sense, which is why we've got the Nile in there as well. It's sort of the land of the dead and the land of the living. So I'm really happy with it.
Yeah, it was nice to line up the pyramids with the Orion's belt from the last card, just like as a sort of personal note. It was fun to do. The song choices were, you went with, this was really good, To Zion by Lauryn Hill and Carlos Santana, and I went Beyonce, Bigger, which is from the Lion King movie that no one saw, the CGI one.
Awesome. All right, so we get onto the goodest boy, the dog card, and again, kind of like this wouldn't be a Gordon White production. if it wasn't a reference to Saint Guinevere, which is a Dark Age French dog saint. So again, the pastoral, like it's a dog. And again, this is famously, if you are an illustrator, same thing with like the rider card. Before we had cameras fast enough, it was just like a general guess as to what horses' legs looked like while they were running. And similarly with the dog card, very often it's a greyhound with its legs splayed out the front and back as if it's like flying rather than running, again in like a fake pastoral scene. So it's a card of loyalty, and basically it's a card of loyalty, and one of the ways of doing that, I think, better is St. Guinevere, which was still a greyhound as far as people know, like in the story, but he became a saint because his master was out hunting and he was left to protect the master's baby son, and a serpent came in trying to attack the baby, and so Guinevere fought the serpent and like in the baby's bassinet, and so there's like feathers from the pillows everywhere and blood and so on, and the master comes home and sees feathers and blood and whatever and ruined pillows and can't see the baby and thinks the dog has attacked it and kills the dog, and then he finds the baby and the cut up bit of snake, and so it's like, oh, you know, so there's this, it's the dog is a martyr to loyalty and protection. So we kind of went in that angle with it, and so that's why we have a dog with a halo as the goodest boy.
Yeah, we actively chose not to have like. So the idea, I think, at the time was that he's overlooking the kind of the property or the estate or whatever, like the master's land. So we actively chose not to have like an actual snake because we already have the serpent card.
Yeah.
But we have like the weird kind of X-Files glow from like the forest behind, the trees behind. So there's like a menace. There's some kind of menace that it's still guarding against. And I love to draw on the sort of saint eyes that I attribute to like movies like the Tilda Swinton, where she played Gabrielle and she had like the glowing eyes and everything.
Yeah, cool.
So that, yeah, fun to draw.
And we also had like fairy light, like fireflies.
Yeah,
We're doing the UFOs, fairies, and scything because we also wanted. This is funny enough. It's kind of a sequence with the other two, like Dog Star, Dog Day Afternoon. Not really the movie, but like Dog Star. Days of Dog Star Sirius, which is where St. Guinevere, who also protects from plague, like St. Roch does, that's where his saint day is. So we still needed to keep like the astro theme in there. So it's like an alien saint dog. And one of the ways we wanted to do that, and we were doing the UFOs, fairies, and cycles, at least the premium members were at the time. So it was really fun to have like, the X-Files fairy light. This is a sort of liminal being as the secondary association. But what did we do for songs?
The songs were You've Got a Friend in Me by Randy Newman from Toy Story, and Thank You, this was your choice. Thank You for Being a Friend from
Oh yeah,
Girl.
I nailed that one.
Gotta get it in there somewhere.
Very good. All right. And so we move on to the poster for the new Dune, and we can see Timothy Chalamet there on a horse.
Yeah, there he is. Unfinished, but we had like a kind of solid idea of what we were doing with it. And it's just kind of these sort of mid-10 cards have fell into development. They're on the waiting list while we sort of sort out the sort of the front 10.
Yeah.
But it was a strong concept.
So what I was joking about Timothy Chalamet, although he is in everything, so he probably is the rider, but that's the rider from the rider card. If we're on the tower card for people listening, and the general idea, the tower card means something different. It was actually in a reading for a client the other day, and like a shamanic energy medicine client. And he's like, oh no. And I'm like, no, relax. The tower card means something different. Well, it has bad, depending again on how chaotic you are, but it's a card of like officialdom. So it can be universities or learning. It can also be prison, like it can be in that sense, orthodoxy and officialdom and so on. So we wanted some kind of like big tower in an arid area that's probably in that real Gormenghast sense, maybe a bit crumbly, because that's what happens to officialdom anyway. It gets kind of sclerotic and crumbles down, but it needed to be, which we've got, that's the Gormenghast energy of like continually being reinforced and built out, because they orthodoxy grows in the same way a cancer does, and so I think that that's definitely there. It's definitely there in the initial concept. What do we go with for songs?
The songs were
Yeah, speaking
you
of songs,
chose I Fought the Law by the Bobby Fuller
give
Four.
me a minute.
And
I think did I stop screen share? Yeah, because something's playing on
yeah.
my computer.
No.
Oh, I know why. My sorry, I'm due at a psychedelic conference, which I'll just miss the beginning of. Let me just go back to the slide we were on. Bear with everyone. I'm due at a psychedelic conference, and screen share, desktop one, share, and they have like pre-music, play from current slide. Like, I was wondering what that was. Listening to something, but they're just as in the 10 minutes before they start playing this music on the thing. Anyway, doesn't matter. So what did we go with? Speaking of songs?
The song here was I Fought the Law by the Bobby Fuller Four, and I chose Halsey. That was your choice. I chose Halsey Castle from like the Huntsman.
Yeah,
movie,
you
so
won
it's a
that.
dramatic one.
Yeah. Mine's a good choice, but you won that. All right, now we come to the card that Colin spent 60% of the time of the project on.
And it's still not done.
Which is the garden card. And it's lovely.
Yeah.
And it's basically somewhere between the Place des Vosges in Paris and Stars Hollow from Gilmore Girls.
Yes.
But tell us more.
That is Lorelai and her progeny on the bandstand just discussing life.
Drinking ho-chos.
Dude, yeah. Yeah, that's it was a great card to draw, because we have these kind of like pop culture references that we share in common, like Gilmore Girls, Penny Dreadful. And I was like, this was a delight to do, just because it felt like we were kind of re-entering and pervertising a world that it was nice to go back to. Yeah.
No, really good. But it's a garden card, and the garden card is a card of like fun, pleasant social community interactions, that kind of thing. So it's party, it's being in public, and so on. So there's a kind of like passeggiata feel to it, where people will just like promenade, and there's like fairy lights and other stuff to show that it is a celebration. But yeah, not done yet. But another really good card that just kind of nails the cinematic universe. I will say, the child at the front has an enormous penis, and whilst
no. Oh God.
Toby's no slouch in that department, it's not quite like that.
It's supposed to be a hoot, like like kids from ye olde times had like a ringed. Well, I'm not even going to continue that sentence. Okay, noted.
But this is really fun. It's like a really good card. It kind of like, it's so weird that you could get this right. I mean, like, get the energy of it. This card almost has the energy that the house card is supposed to have, because it's like,
this is more of a social card.
Yeah,
which I'm good in that direction, just not like the homemaking card.
Anyway, it's fantastic. It's really, really cool. And what songs do we have?
So these were great choices as well. Kylie Minogue once again. Oh no, I think this is our first time, but we have chatted about her before. Celebration, and George Michael, Outside. Just to give that kind of.
Well, the other thing, it's a cruising card, right? Like, again, if you're reading for gays, there's the butt card, there's the twink card, there's the cruising card. You get all three in a row, you're in for a good time. But yeah, so I think this one's really, really fun, and is a contender for, because some of the stuff we don't know yet is like, what's going to be on the cover of the book, what's the box going to be like, what are the kind of like hero images for the whole deck that get used for things. And I mean, this is a contender for that. Yeah, moving on to the Montaigne. Now, again, we decided to go in a bit more dramatic and kind of less European direction. So this is Alsangate, which is an Apu. It's my Apu. So I'm a son of Alsangate after my last few rites. So it's a sacred mountain in Peru. And we kind of wanted to do like the beginning of the Two Towers dramatic helicopter shots of the Misty Mountains, or the Southern Alps in New Zealand, to be more correct, with it, just to give it a bit more of that kind of drama. But it's a card of blockages, right? So like there's a mountain in the way, mountain to climb, or slowness or barriers or so on. And what's kind of good about using, especially if we've got one side of it in shadow, what's kind of good about the mountain card in this sense is that there are some things that are permanent blockages, or that you permanently can't see, like whilst you're in life, you can't see death. And so like that kind of proverbial other side of the mountain thing, I think is conveyed really well here.
Yeah, I think I might pop the mountain out. Put the inset behind the mountain. I think I was supposed to do that and I've just forgotten. I think that this will be another card that has like the sort of inset trick. But it's fun to draw.
Well,
the song, sorry.
Yeah, no. Well, I mean, that makes sense. Like if it's literally blocking the inset, like that.
Yeah. And I think we got like, this was another one where I got to like sort of do a bit of travel without.
Oh, and you found the Rainbow Mountain, didn't you?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
So it was like I spent an hour or two just joyfully looking at drone footage of somewhere that I'll not get to go
when I
for,
send
like,
material
5
over to
years.
Colin, and it's travel stuff, it's because we both missed out on some much needed adventures last year. So don't let this hurt the heart too much. But here's some amazing drone footage of like the Andes.
Just for dinner. So your choice was A Night on the Bear Mountain. What is Mizar, whoever that's by. And I went with Saya Never Give Up, which was from the movie Lion, which we ended up having a weird conversation about because you were like, yeah, that's a really good movie.
Yeah, set in Tasmania. So
that's correct. That's right.
And we were talking about it because it's set in the late 70s in Tasmania, in Hobart in particular. And the good thing about Hobart, if you want to set a film in the late 70s, is you do not need to do any set dressing. The houses, the gardens, the haircuts, all ready for you.
Just done.
All right, on to the Crossroads. And this is a real classic Robert Johnson deal with the devil at the crossroads. Again, it's a magical card. And funnily enough, this is another example of the pastoral, sometimes not even, it's like a road with a sign. Some of the earlier decks are just terrible. And I'm like, why? It's the crossroads. It's such a cool card. So we decided to definitely give it obvious in one instance, but nevertheless, it's the card of decisions. And crucially, because you set it at night and you can't see anywhere to go, it's a card of decisions for the it's the ask again later card in many respects. If it shows up in a reading, you are being called to make the fucking decision yourself. You're not going to be able to see where it goes. So we wanted that kind of big decision with outcomes not necessarily clear feel, and I love the energy of it.
Yeah, it was fun to draw, and the whole time I was doing it, I had in mind the sort of ending scenes of the Ninth Gate where everything got very muted and just the atmosphere was very thick. So I kind of wanted to recreate that kind of spooky, like supernatural vibe. Great to do. I think we had the idea of a devil in the shadow of the tree, but we had to kind of do away with it just because there was too much to fit into the image, and it just wasn't going to read at all. So it
is a deal with a devil card, that's for sure. But and so some of the art we looked at did that. So really cool. What do we do for songs?
So going from talking about the movie Lion, you chose One Day I'll Fly Away with Nicole Kidman for this one, and I chose Raise Hell by Dorothy, which is like just a stomper sort of goth song from like the last couple of years.
Yeah, again, you stick them together, you get that setting off feel. I like it. All right, cool. And now it turns out we're in the mice card, and much like the birds, I guess 19th century bourgeois women would have more experience of mice in their larders and so on. But for a card that's kind of gross, it's just not gross enough, just like the birds. We fixed that. And it turns out that neither, like with a sort of subtle Ratatouille reference because we're both millennials, but it turns out neither of us have seen it.
Yeah. Well, we've seen, and I feel like I've seen enough people talking about it online to know that I've seen enough.
Yeah, exactly. But no, so we went with, and kind of like the birds, it's not the mouse card, it's mice. So like have more than 2 mice. And so we did that. And it's almost a game of like, well, in fact, because it's at night, because it's little losses. That's what for people who are watching it, it's like a kitchen at night with mice everywhere and grossly on the bench top, which did in fact happen to me in London. And so trauma, not this many, thank God. And I also wasn't keeping a stock pot boiling overnight. But it's that little unseen losses, right? That's the whole kind of point of a mouse card. You open up your, I don't know, bag of grain and most of it's gone. So it's gross and done really well in that sense. And you can't really see how many there are because it's at night. It's got a good drama to it.
Yeah, I think the only thing I'll add to the card is maybe we just put like a sort of pot just askew, a lid on the pot, just sort of askew, and that will give me sort of some fun thing to do with like the sort of smoke tendrils going up to that left corner, just so it's not just a blank space.
Yeah, fair enough.
But yeah, otherwise, lovely. Love again. Drawing vermin, apparently my favorite thing to do.
All right. Tell you what isn't, coming back to your Aquarian nonsense.
Oh, we didn't do the song for that.
You
picked
song.
A great song for that.
Oh,
you picked because again, you will occasionally pick a song and I will just be like, yes, and then have to listen to it 5 times in a row because it's reminded me of something I've just forgotten about. And you picked Colin Hay Overkill. And I picked Billet with the Butterfly Wings from the Smashing Pumpkins.
Yeah. All right. Now, very good. All right. But now we get to the bane of your life.
Oh.
Colin needs to see the wizard about a heart.
I'm an Aquarius stellium. This really isn't my forte.
Exactly. Human hearts are irrelevant. So the idea behind it, where we began, is that it was going to be kind of like really cutesy, like a nice Amelie version of like a heartburn ad, right? So the idea is it's some young guy who's come out of the metro in Paris and sees this, young woman across the road and falls in love. And so it's this glowing heart in his chest, and it's supposed to like reflect the rib cage and so on. And Colin had a devil of a time with it because it really did kind of look like an antacid ad. So we went with, and because it's still supposed to be Paris and Montmartre, and the heart card is heart chakra, which is why there's a Sanskrit icon there. It's also the sacred heart. So we still went with the idea of like heart in chest to be love, but we again, because it's a magically operant deck, it needed to be kind of like the sacred medicine of the heart. So like it's, yeah, tell us about your adventure of the heart.
Yeah. So again, the concept was strong, and I was like, I know exactly what you're talking. You gave, so this would be a great time to talk about Pinterest. You provide, we use Pinterest on the live shows just to show Gordon's like inspiration, the images that are inspiration for what the card's going to look like, and we have christened it cunt board because it's such a pain in the ass to use. But this is, we are now early adopters of the Pinterest to podcast sort of pipeline, because I've since come to find out that a lot of podcasts use Pinterest as like a visual guide that they can get like their community to kind of follow along and kind of add and detract to and stuff.
We're trendsetters. What do you want? We're trendsetters. What do you want?
Oh, yeah, yes, of course. Correct. Yeah, so the images that were strong, like I knew exactly what it was, and then just as I was making it, I just could not figure out like the effect and it's a layer thing, and I was just like, oh. And I knew it took, we diced with it for 3 weeks, I think, because I was just like, I know I can do this, I know I can get it there. And then it just was, I think maybe there was just too many elements, too many story elements, and it was just, and it was so frustrating, and it's still so frustrating because I'm like, I feel like it will end up being amazing. I feel like it is now my business to make the house card and the heart card like the best cards of the day.
There you go. Well,
like as a personal, it's the only way you can get to me as an Aquarius with these sort of elements is if it's no event, it's a personal vendetta.
one of the things that may change, which was a suggestion from the crew on the call, was we might actually have the thorns that are surrounding it like breaking. So the thorns are there,
right,
and kind of like, so the heart sort of breaking out of it, which is quite good. I saw a cardiologist this week. I remember that was one of the other ones.
That's
like,
right.
That's weird.
Yeah.
So I went to a cardiologist for the first time in my life that week. And the other one I forgot to mention, the tree card. Was that the week I did ayahuasca? I think it was. So the ayahuasca ceremonies on the farm were like one of those kind of like, this is weird. We're doing the tree card and I'm doing ayahuasca, and it is a card, especially if you're choosing chuchuwasi as the tree. But all this stuff that wasn't clearly planned, certainly not going to a cardiologist, ends up happening to you as you're doing this sort of deck. But what did you have? What do we have for songs?
So for the heart card, I went Love Story by Taylor Swift, and you went Can't Help Falling in Love by Elvis Presley. So we're getting mushy that week.
Yeah, that was nice.
Because I think the idea was it's like a guy that's like leaving it was like a Parisian cafe to kind of go and see his paramour somewhere or whatever.
Coming out of the Rue des Abbesses metro
That's
stop,
right.
And the bistro is called Le Sancerre.
Because you used to work from there.
No, and also we went like my first trip to Paris. We went there for James's birthday. My sister used to live in Paris, so the first time we went, she's like, "Here are the places." I mean, it's Paris, so it's difficult to go wrong if you're going to like bistros in the right place. Like, you're not gonna. If you go to McDonald's, you get McDonald's, but if otherwise, you'll be fine. But she said, like, for whatever it's worth, here are my suggestions. And we went to a few of them. They're all good, as you'd expect. But Le Sancerre was just like exactly what you wanted from a Parisian bistro. It was just, it was perfect. So that's why it's in there. Anyway, all right, on to the next card where Colin shows us his ring.
Hey,
that was really fun. The amount of
another pun-filled show.
They write themselves.
They really do.
So it's the ring card if you're watching, obviously, and we've already done the butt card, so it can't be like an even further close-up. So it is in fact a ring. It is, although for the purposes of not being sued by Saul Zaentz, it is not Elrond's ring from Lord of the Rings, but it also kind of is. So the obvious choice for someone like me is like, we'll make it the One Ring, and I'm like, yeah, but that's not the right match to the ring card. Like, it actually needs to be, it's a medium to good card, the ring, right? I know it's actually a good card. So it had to be in that kind of world. So we went with an elvish ring. Rings are sacred because they are depictions or expressions of the eternal, of like no beginning, no end, hence them being loops and so on. So and that's kind of why the elves built rings. It's that kind of perpetuation of the good in the world. So we wanted to do one like that. And Elrond's ring has a nice kind of color to it with the blue and so on. So that's where the inspiration is. But one of the things that I enjoyed about doing this episode was, because I did, back when I had proper jobs, I would have a creative agency. So I got reasonably good at briefing. But what I said to Colin, because for people listening, the mise en scène is that it's a ring on a rock by like the river, again, probably the Urubamba River, with like mountains, and you can see the other side of the river basically. And I said I want it to be like a 1980s Rolex magazine ad where it's on the road. And he sort of stopped me mid-sentence going, I know exactly what that is.
Like I could see it in my mind.
So yeah, how was that?
That was great. Again, a great briefing. But I could definitely I could see the vibe, like Swarovski crystals and like some Swiss like watch. Like I was seeing like 1,000 ad campaigns just rolling through my brain. Really enjoyed drawing the sort of the stone, the sapphire. But yeah, I think we kind of went through a few compositions just with because there was the issue of scaling, like, because as you said, like in Lord of the Rings, they had like gigantic ring props just for close-ups and stuff. And this kind of was, at one point, this was looking like that because the framing maybe wasn't right, or I had on a sort of collection of stones by the river. And it was one that came in, the idea, the essential elements were all there, but we had to kind of niggle with it for a few weeks just to kind of get things to make sense on the card.
Yeah, I think again it looks better on your iPad, but I think it's kind of a bit overblown out on one side, and I think it probably could do with a bit more mountain detail, kind of like in the house card.
I think I'll change the mountains because they don't read as mountains. It's too blurry, I think.
Yeah.
So yeah, you're right. I'll niggle that.
They look, if it is the Urubamba River, like the mountains from the house card are basically the same, right? So
yeah.
You'll they're in there somewhere, like faking a moon landing. Just use the same background.
I'll get Kubrick or Ryan back in both. The song choices were Ring of Fire, and that's the song about Johnny Cash's sort of romance with June, and you chose an excellent one, which was Somewhere Only We Know.
Yeah. Because
I think you said at the time, like literally any version of this song will fit the sort of the brief.
Because like a ring encloses two people, so that's one of the other things. It's that kind of, in theory, for marriages that aren't open, but it's enclosing two people in what is effectively a secret, right? It's a privatizing and enclosing of something precious. And that's what you do with rings and so on. So yeah, both good song choices. Mine's probably slightly better that week.
I think you nailed it out there.
Yeah. All right. Now we come to, I think, my favorite card. It's the book card for people who are listening. Love it. So I wanted it to hit multiple reference points to like my life, but also the cinematic universe that we're going with here. So the eagle-eyed will notice that the giant book in this bazaar. So first of all, it's a reference to Abdullah Lazarid and the Necronomicon in that kind of like somewhere in North Africa, somewhere in Arabia vibe. But the book is Jung's Red Book, like literally the one that he wrote in, right? Because if there was ever to be a book, not that one's evil like the Necronomicon, but that's kind of like a cornerstone, maybe one of the most, to me anyway, important books of the 20th century. So it's this enormous one in like a bazaar somewhere with its priest at the front as if they're about to like read from this holy book, which in fact happens. There are enormous versions of the Septuagint, like and like the Jewish holy books. You can get like these huge versions of them in places like Jerusalem where they're kind of used in ceremony. So we wanted to go in that direction, and I love it. I think it's amazing.
Yeah, this was one of the cards that again gave me a sort of pleasure in traveling without actually going anywhere, because I ended up looking at a lot of like walkthroughs of like Marrakesh markets and like riads and things, and just to like soak up a kind of vibe. So it was very good for me personally. But yeah, a lot of fun to do.
No, really cool, really good. And yeah, this is another contender for obvious reasons. This is another contender for the front cover of the book or some variation of it. But I think it's one of my favorite cards for sure. And for the top tier people, and they're all sold out, who end up getting artwork, I hope they pick this as one of the poster options, because I think it's fantastic. What do we do for songs?
This was a great one. So I picked Easy Ride by Madonna, which is like her esoteric ode to all our Kabbalah stuff, but it's like all about wisdom. And you picked You Learn by Alanis Morissette.
Oh, yeah. That's good.
So we kind of picked 90s queen.
Amazing is where, we're only 27, but all right.
Yeah, it's Dua Lipa for us or nothing, basically.
We're Zoomers, damn it. All right. And now we're onto the letter card, which, I kind of wanted, this is coming back to that James Bond interdimensional riverboat casino thing. I wanted it to be a letter as if it's being delivered to maybe the guy who has the clover brooch on, but as if it's James Bond at a table and he gets like a letter delivered, but it's a kind of like a creepy parchment letter. So it's a letter on the silver tray with what is fairly obviously casino carpet. And the guy's top down head, I still think needs some work, but
I think it's maybe an old version, because I sent you the updated version, just
didn't know this.
Which I essentially shaved off the nose, and he's missing like his arm doesn't connect with the tray, so it might just be a lost in translation number there.
Oh, there you go. But like the general idea, I think works really well. It's it's a cool card.
And we discussed that the sort of carpet pattern might have a kind of octopus kind of kraken pattern once we finalize the kind of the border and the card back designs that would match that, just as a little kind of, you know, universal kind of cinematic universe expansion pack.
And the back of the card is going to have some kind of stylized kraken stuff to keep with the theme of the project too, but we haven't, I said the royal we haven't done that yet. What do we do for songs?
This one was, hold on, I'm going to sit right down and write a letter by Nina Simone, and yours was the winner, another Kylie, sincerely yours.
Yeah. When that came out, like the yours sincerely, the way she sings it is honestly like the movement of a hand writing that in cursive. It was really cool. But so the letter card is, because there's actually a lot of communication cards in the deck, right? Like the rider is the surprise bitch news card. The letter is often more contractual. So you'd be looking for that if you were closing on a house or waiting for a job offer. That would actually, you'd look at where the rider and the letter are in relation to each other in the relational deck. But so we kind of had to go in that direction. And also in the depiction of it, that isn't like that's not a telegram on the tray, right? Like that's some sort of last will and testament. So that's what the letter card typically means. So it's worth pointing out.
It has our little fortune fills, like chaos star kind of insignia on it, which was a cool detail.
That's there, like on the priest in the book.
That's card, right. It's on his little hat.
It's on top of the gazebo in the garden card. So again, just like, we like to keep ourselves entertained.
Yeah, we're storytellers. Like, what can you do?
We're storytellers. We definitely don't plagiarize from TV shows like Taboo.
Correct.
This is definitely not the world's most beautiful white man, Tom Hardy.
What can be said, truly? Like you gave me a brief, and I was like, "Here you go. This is what you asked for."
Yeah, fortunately, because when we get to the woman card, a similar situation happens. But so people who haven't seen Taboo, shame on you. What are you doing listening to this? How have you got this far into the episode? The man card needs to be kind of like late 19th century as well. So it's it's usually like a Tory fox hunter, like with riding crops and like you standing near a tree or whatever in the kind of classic boring pastoral sense. And we did discuss this on the right episode, whilst unfortunately many of them are quite attractive, like the polo set, and I don't care to admit that to myself.
Listen, it is what it is.
We wanted to go with like a bit more of like a rounded and powerful masculine energy, and this comes back to gender and cards and all the rest of it. And one of the things that Camellia said that I just think it's perfect in her sword wielding way is she's like, listen, it's all made up. Like gender is all made up. It's different in every culture. Doesn't matter. I don't care who you are or what you are on the other side. You pick which one you are beforehand, and your partner is the other one, and it's all made up, and that's what it is. There's no fucking reality to this stuff. And it's just a kind of and that's how you solve gender in the Lenormand cards. You like in one or two sentences yelled at your client. You're like, I don't care. It's all made up. Just pick one. And that's kind of like the energy we correctly bring to it. So the male and female cards are a bit more polarity, but it's nevertheless like, what is that kind of like potent masculine energy? Because it's like Ace of Hearts. So it's like full Mars energy. Again, got that from Gay Lenormand royalty, Ryan Edward. So yeah, we're going with like a guy in the street who I would definitely wreck the whole life of.
He has his little red ribbon around his hat, so it's a nod back to this like original black and white and red theme that we were going, that we thought in our youth, in our brazen youth, that we thought we were going with. What was the street? Is it? I remember the street is like where you used to get the
Oh yeah,
bus.
yeah. So it's Regent Street, but it's like at the top. It's basically at the sort of like Oxford Circus crossing is where I used to get my bus. But yeah, that's. And what do we pick for songs?
I went with "I'm a Man" by Blackstrobe, which is a very pulsy masculine song, which I love. And again, it's one of those songs, if you're of a certain age, which for us is 25, 27, you'll know what it is when you hear it. And you went with "Holding Out for a Hero" by Bonnie Tyler.
Yeah, nailed it. Like, let's go with an absolutely gayer song if it was masculine.
That's it.
So the weird thing was, in between this and the next week's, James and I were up in Hobart seeing the Rocky Horror Picture Show, where in just 7 days
right.
I can make you a man. And I'm like, oh, that's actually what Colin's doing. That's pretty cool.
Right now.
There was another one of those like weird things that happened. There was also a Ring one that I forget. But each week, again, I kind of mentioned it in the Telegram group if something happens. But each week it's one thing or the other. But so this is inspired by, for legal reasons, not the same as, just as a passing reference, Tom Hardy's character James Delaney from Taboo, right? Which is,
yeah, that's one we can get away with. It's Tom Hardy, it's Justin Timberlake, it's maybe Boy George a little bit. We can get away with this one.
Oh, yeah, I see that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. So if we move to the final card, speaking of shows I love and women I will marry, well, it's actually the final card for the deck. Obviously, this is card 29 or whatever. We've still got 6 or 7 weeks to go. But the woman card, now, if I just jump back, if you're watching this, you will see that they, so Tom is on the right of the card as we're looking at it. And Eva Green, my future wife, is on the left of the card. And so you kind of, during the episode, I kind of put them next to each other because they're kind of designed, because it's the man and the woman card, and most of the time fortune telling is affairs of the heart. So that kind of balance is right there. But for this deck and for this cinematic universe, it's the woman card, and the perfect woman, as far as I'm concerned, is clearly Vanessa Ives from one of my favorite shows until it got bad, Penny Dreadful.
It didn't get bad till its finale, so that's okay.
No, it didn't get bad till LA. I didn't even mind like the other stuff.
Oh, yeah, that
City of Angels stuff.
Yeah, that's a conversation for another day. But I agree.
And you'll note that Eva, which is of course her name, has the book from the book card in it, because of course she does. She's clever. And this was interesting because the whole idea, and we'll have the same thing happening with the insets, where we'll send, like, we kind of worked out the sort of celebrity inspiration for each of the court cards for the insets, right? And it didn't occur to me that Colin is actually really good at drawing celebrities. Like, he would have been good in the, like, funny enough, in the late 19th century for like society pages, like in the Lady or whatever. Like, you would have had a job, instead of being like a society photographer, but a society like drawer for these magazines, like an illustrator, because that looks almost probably too, I don't think Eva would care, and we'll send her a deck, but like probably too much.
Yeah,
like Eva Green, but any attempt to move, it looked like Manila Luzon when you move.
We sort of were like, okay, let's try and de-Eva the situation, devolve. And it was like Manila Luzon or like Magic-Cananic, and it was just like, you know what? It is what it is. Like, no one's gonna really take too much of an offense, but we'll work on it and just see what we can do, because it's a shame to make it look less like the character that we're kind of taking inspiration for. But you know, the law has a different opinion. Sadly.
Well, we will get a legal opinion on it. But yeah, so you can plainly see that's Eva Green, and that's a trouble, like, because again, like, I'm going to marry Eva Green at some stage. Like, she's so beautiful that you think, well, why are we going to make the woman card ugly? Why are we going to do that to ourselves? You know, because she's got to be able to. Otherwise, if you jump back to like Tom, it's like, well, that's a mismatch because he's really handsome. What are we going to do? The idea that Tom Hardy's going to date Manila Luzon, I don't think so. Tom Hardy.
I'll post the alternative into the Telegram chat so everyone can check it out there if they want to follow the Phil's fortune for
The
the Telegram
saga, the
chat.
drama as we carry on.
Because I post a lot of thumbnails and things there, so we get a lot of like it's basically it's Lenormand Untucked, right?
Exactly. All right, so I mean that's where we're at.
Oh, our choices for the song for that was
Yeah, the woman.
The women card was I'm Every Woman by Whitney Houston. Excellent. That was you. And I went with Glory Box by Portishead. So we were really feeling our estrogen that week.
Yeah. I'm glad Whitney got into, because kind of like Eva, especially before she got addicted to drugs and joined a cult and whatever before the end, she was so beautiful and so talented. Like if you actually just want a picture of like what is archetypally that kind of like perfect expression of that kind of stuff, it's Whitney. So well, I tell you what, if Eva Green doesn't work, just put Whitney's head.
We'll just swap out. Next week we're doing Jessica Lange.
Yeah, so obviously you're working on the Lily and what have you now, but like we're at the end of the walkthrough. Anything else we want to say about the project and everything so far?
Well, personally, it's been hard work, but it's been a pleasure. And I'm at that point now. We're nearing the sort of end of the development stage. Like I'm excited to just have the deck in my hands. So you can pre-order them at your website. You can check us out in the Telegram chat. You can find me on TikTok, unfortunately, and it's mostly just art stuff at Colin Alexander Draws and Instagram and all that crap. And yeah, we'll see you with we're going to do an unboxing, I think, is the next.
Well, that's like
the next time I appear on Rune Soup.
Yeah, so we wanted to do this one now. This is actually worth pointing out as we get near the end of the deck for two reasons. Like, there's enough that people can get a feel for it, and also we know what this journey is like, because we're at card 30. We know what the journey is. There's enough time for people to join and contribute, because the actual live episodes are in fact really fun to join in on. So if you wanted to pick up for the last few of them, you'll see them on the YouTube, all scheduled and ready to roll. So you can do that, but also we won't do an episode in 7 cards time when it's finished, because it won't be finished. Like I won't be done with the book and you won't be done with the cards, but we probably will do something when they do in fact exist, and we can like show it. So this is totally the right moment for the walkthrough and a discussion of like creativity and ceremony, and the fact that it did all these strange things to your life and continues to do so.
Excellent. A joy to go through, like a walk through memory lane, to be honest.
Yeah. But also to do it's like, right, I need to change that and I need to move that.
Anyway, I'm going to go and I have like a full aneurysm now.
All right. Well, yeah, really, really fun. And again, guys, it's weekly on like Thursday night for most of you, Friday morning for me. And I'll see you next week.